Hey everyone, Seth Abramovich here, senior writer at The Hollywood Reporter. Welcome back to another episode of It Happened in Hollywood. This week we have one of the most influential indie filmmakers from the 1990s who now probably directs episodes of TV shows that you love. All that and more on this week's episode of It Happened in Hollywood. Hey there, and welcome back, listeners. I am really excited this week because we have one of my filmmaking heroes, Gregg Araki. I've been seeing his name bubble up recently on social media. His movie Mysterious Skin was in the top 100 on Letterboxd, and just generally people appreciating him or feeling maybe he's a little underappreciated. So I'm excited to spend an hour with him and celebrate his vision. Gregg, grew up in Santa Barbara. He's a Southern California boy. He went to UCLA to study film, and he started making the kinds of films he wanted to make. And part of what made them so breakthrough was that he was gay, and the films were dealing with gay themes and gay sex in very frank ways. And this was way back before that was something you saw a lot of. And his first few movies, The Living End was the one that really made an impression on me. 1992, it was sort of two guys, a gay hustler and sort of a video store nerd, but also a good-looking gay guy, kind of hook up and go on this crime spree, and they both are HIV positive, which was something you just did not see in cool indie movies at the time. Very bold filmmaking. And then he kind of stepped it up with something known as the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy, the second of which we're going to be dealing with today, The Doom Generation from 1995. That one has an amazing cast. It has Rose McGowan in her first major role. It has Jonathan Schaech playing this sort of sexy drifter character, and James Duval, who was sort of a muse to Gregg and was in a lot of his films. And it's crazy and surreal and sexy and very in your face. And it has just been remastered and re-released, and it looks amazing. So definitely, if you've never seen Doom Generation, give it a look. And join me now as me and Gregg Araki talk about his singular career. Gregg Araki, thank you so much for being part of It Happened in Hollywood. This is something I've wanted for a long time, and I think our timing didn't work. You were remastering Doom Generation last season, but now it's out. It's playing in different theaters around the country, and I'm just so excited. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
You don't know me, but I definitely know you, and you have a huge influence on me in terms of your filmmaking. I mean, you were my Godard. Like the things you were throwing up on the screen were exactly what I needed to see at exactly the right time. I'm 50, so I moved to New York in '95. That's the year Doom Generation came out. But I grew up in Montreal, and I went to McGill, and I will never forget the first time I saw The Living End and the effect it had on me. I didn't know those kinds of queer movies could be made and those things could be said. You had this punk aesthetic that really spoke to me. So thank you for bringing that language to my movie encyclopedia. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That's very flattering and humbling to hear. So, to be mentioned in the same breath as Godard is pretty special. So,
as we usually do, I like to delve a little bit into your background before we jump into one movie, which will be Doom Generation. So you're the ultimate SoCal kid, right? Could you tell us a bit about growing up down here?
Yeah, I was born in Los Angeles, but I spent most of my childhood in Santa Barbara. My parents moved there when I think I was about 5, and I was there through, I guess, my early 20s. I did my undergraduate studies in film studies at UC Santa Barbara, and then came here in the early 80s, I guess. 82 is when I graduated my my undergraduate studies. And so in 82, I came to go to USC Film School and kind of have been in LA ever since. I mean, I used to come to LA a lot when I was living in Santa Barbara. I would come, my relatives, I have aunts and uncles that lived here, and then I would come to shows all the time. And I just was very LA centric all my life. And then, moved here in sort of the early 80s and never looked back. So.
And your scene, were you like with the skaters? Were you with the surfer? Like who was your crowd in high school and then first year of college?
My crowd in high school was very eclectic, but particularly in college, I was very super heavily influenced by punk rock music and new wave music and alternative culture. And me and my friends in college, we used to go to shows all the time. And, it's really funny that at the Sundance premiere of the Doom Generation Restoration, Keith Morris from Black Flag and the Circle Jerks came to our screening. He is friends with Jimmy. He had done a movie with Jimmy, I think. And I was just, oh my God, like me and my friends used to watch The Decline of Western Civilization by Penelope Spheres all the time. And we used to listen to the soundtrack all the time when we were undergraduates. And so it was so crazy to see him in the flesh at our screening. So yeah, it was just, I was just at that very formative age, in my late teens, early 20s, when that music was happening. And it was such a profound influence on my worldview and my sensibility and just the whole DIY aesthetic and the idea that it's not about, being top 40 or being mainstream or being popular. It's about just, doing your own kind of artistic thing and sort of, just marching to your own drummer and just, putting your stuff out there and, and in the hopes that like-minded people will find it. So it was, it would just hit me at the exact right moment. I mean, I sort of grew up at the exact right time. So that was a just profound influence on me. And I remember my last semester as an undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, Michael Renoff, who actually ended up teaching at USC after that, he had this Godard class. And so I had a whole quarter where we did nothing but study Godard movies.
Well, there you go.
Which was likewise a huge, I was right at that moment when I was at my most sort of formative. And, but Godard was doing this very sort of just punk rock in cinema. And so, that really resonated with me. And so, I was very, very lucky and very, very fortunate in terms of being in the right place at the right time.
This season is turning into a bit of a punk rock season. We have Alex Cox. We did a
oh wow,
Repo Man.
Repo Man is another touchstone for me. I remember seeing that. What was that? 82 or something like that, early 80s, right?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, I forget the exact year right now.
Again, same thing. I was, 21, 22 years old. And I remember that movie just having a profound influence and just being like, I want to do these kind of punk rock kind of movies. And, that's what that fascinated me. And also Stranger Than Paradise was, a bit later, I think like 85 or something. And I remember was
Jim Jarmusch's masterpiece. Yeah,
that was a big influence on just not only me, but my whole like Rick Linklater, Allison Anders, like we all talked about that movie because it came out just at that time, before Sundance sort of became Sundance. And, when we were all just sort of working on our first features, and it was just like, you could do this. You could just make this weird black and white, super artsy movie, and it'll show in the theater, and people will see it, and so all that stuff is, again, I was just right place, right time.
It's interesting that you said you went to USC because over the years I found USC was definitely the mainstream stream, and UCLA was like Alex Cox went to the UCLA.
Yeah,
and
I know.
So what brought you to USC, and did you find that your aesthetic was hitting up against what they expected?
Yeah, very much so. Like I actually applied to UCLA and did not get in. Like I applied to 3 schools for my master's, and it was USC, UCLA, and San Francisco State. And so I got into San Francisco State and USC, but I did not get into UCLA, which was kind of my first choice. And so it actually worked out, perfectly for me. I mean, USC was definitely the Steven Spielberg school. It was the one where the sort of more mainstreamy kind of filmmakers that went on to have careers in Hollywood. They all went to USC, and so it was funny. I remember my first year at USC. I had a teacher that just thought I was, because I was just the arty punk kid. You know what I mean? I had like this funny haircut, and we listened to like new wave punk music all the time, and so so I was just the arty punk kid, and I remember my teacher going, because my short films, my student films were always kind of Goddardy, and he's all Goddard, Schmuddard, it was just like it was just so like antagonistic to anything that had to do with sort of art cinema or European cinema, or there was just this. It was a very much kind of in the mainstream tradition, but it was great because it made me very much a survivor and very kind of independent and very really strong and really kind of confident in what I was doing. It was one of the, I remember film school was very much preparing me for the world in a sense. I remember just really feeling that sense that cinema is so subjective. I mean, it's something that you learned in film school, and it's just like, it's really the spectator and the movie and this sort of dialectic between the, that synthesis and that conflict that creates movies, and that every movie is different, and every audience member is different. And so, it really served me in my early years because, my movies tend to be quite polarizing. And if I was like a super sensitive, just sort of trying to please everybody type of person with that sensibility, I don't think I would have made it, because it's like, it's like some of my early movies, Living in particular, very polarizing. I mean, like ardent supporters, but equally passionate, detractors just wanting me to, crucify me. And so, I think my sort of cinematic upbringing was pretty much exactly what I needed to do. I feel like I've just through my life just been a very, lucky person in terms of being in the right place at the right time. And, what sort of, happened was always kind of meant to happen, I think.
I feel like you are a true artist, and that that's what sort of sets you apart from other filmmakers, that there is something you're trying to say. And I wonder, was it formulated in your mind, or were you just like, how did you come up with these scripts and these stories?
I feel like it was very, much in my sort of generation. It's like I kind of came of age during that film school generation, which is sort of the beginning, when film studies was just being started taken seriously, and there was this whole sort of film school sensibility, and the auteur theory was so, the idea of the director as the sort of author of the piece, and it just all of that stuff, the French New Wave, and it was a very specific time in, I think, film culture, in the sense that I sort of got the sense that would always be that way. And it wasn't, because like shortly after that, I know friends who've like taught film school, and film students, their focus shifted a bit, in terms of wanting to be more, in this sort of post Sundance age, be Quentin Tarantino, be, direct a Marvel movie. It's just sort of like follow those paths. That's not what it was about when I went to film school. When I went to film school, it was just, film history and film studies and film criticism, and like, Godard and Kurosawa as well, and Hawks and Hitchcock and everybody. The idea of I think super heavily influenced by that whole cahiers du cinema sort of school of those French New Wave filmmakers where, film is this, amazing art form, and it's sort of like the most expressive of all the art forms, and that, directors have a worldview, and they have their, you're sort of approaching cinema as a painter would approach a canvas, or as a poet would, write poetry. And so, that's kind of the way that was sort of my education. So, and again, because of this sort of alternative culture and new wave music, and, that whole scene was so much a part of where my head was at. And then also being a person of color and, queer and everything else, it really, I had a voice, and I really felt that there was never any question of like, oh, should I write something that's more like mainstream or commercial, or within, the sort of just circumscribed ideas of what, kind of Hollywood movie making should be. It was more just like, this is, I'm steeped in cinema history and like all the different genres and all the different auteurs. And from there, like what do I want to say, and how do I want to say it, kind of.
Let's talk about the queer piece of it. First of all, what was coming out like for you, or discovering that you're not heterosexual?
It was, again, I don't want to keep harping on this, but I feel like I was such a, the time I was born, it's like I sort of was the best of all worlds, in the sense that when I first was sort of exploring my sexuality and sort of feeling like, oh, like I'm different, or am I attracted to other men, or what's going on, it was before it was so widely accepted. What I always say that's so interesting, because it's like changed so much in my lifetime, it's in a kind of unbelievable way, but I was able to sort of, I was there for the whole thing. It's just like when I first, went to my first gay bar, when I was 18, 19, it was still very much a secret thing, in the late 70s, early 80s. And what I always say that's so sort of telling is when I was at the USC Film School, with my arty haircut and, me being the artsy guitar kid, I was not out. Like and it was, 10 years later, I definitely would have been out, but so I experienced everything, the closet, and, and it's like having experienced it, I can feel, to me, I'm just grateful that, it's a completely different experience. I sort of experienced what it's like to be in the closet. I experienced what it's like to be, out and not in the closet. It's like I've experienced, and now, with gay marriage and, whatever, some crazy like 25% of Gen Z identifying as LGBT, it's like, it's just, I witnessed the whole thing, and it's just, experienced the whole thing, which I think is, such a sort of privileged place to be. If I had been born earlier or later, I would really not have, seen this amazing, incredible, like, evolution and progress that we've had.
And that friction, though, because I remember it as well, it helps create art, right? When you feel that you're being, sublimated or, pushed to the edges or whatever, or just not wanted, that is a creative stimulus. And then the other thing that in rewatching The Living End and also Doom Generation is that AIDS is hanging over it, and sex then was there was like the specter of death was always associated with every time you had sex, and that just became normal. And I don't think kids today really understand what that was like, but it infuses everything you make. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was, being young during this sort of Holocaust of AIDS was a profound, had a profound impact on me. And, that's sort of where the whole queer new wave came from. It was really not like the French new wave where, Todd Haynes and Tom Kalin and, Rose Trochet and all of those people, we didn't just sit in a room and go, oh yeah, we want to change like representation. It was literally just all of us working on our own little projects independently, totally unaware of each other, but influenced by that same thing. And, it's the same thing that it's the reason why Queer Nation and ACT UP were born. It was out of the frustration, out of the despair, and out of the sense of doom that everybody felt that, as a young artist, you had to express it. Like there was so much feeling around it and so much angst and anxiety and dread and anger and just so many emotions. And, and that's kind of, Living In and Totally Fucked Up and Doom Generation are all very much me just kind of processing it on the ground, processing it. And sort of, that was a lot of my output of the early 90s has that. It comes from being under that shroud of AIDS. It was definitely something that was on everybody's mind. And it's hard to imagine, thank God, but to be in your 20s and just think about death all the time. You're constantly thinking about death, and people are just dropping dead in the streets. And it's just it's a fucked up mindset to be in, that, young people today just they have no idea, which is, a blessing that they don't have any idea.
Yeah. Well, they had COVID, but it's not the same as AIDS. AIDS was a whole other thing.
AIDS was so specific because it was so related to sex. And it's, it was very, because it was so horrible in the sense that it was on it was right after the sort of free liberation, gay liberation, and the idea that, gay people had been oppressed and outlawed and hidden away for so long. And then finally, there's some sort of liberation and, with the sexual revolution and everything, just feeling of freedom at last. And then, for this to come along and, it's just sort of try to drive everybody back to the dark ages, is very, very specific, and again, it's a profound impact on our generation, I think.
And created, it killed a lot of artists, but it also created a lot of great art.
Yeah, great art, but again, the whole generation of people lost, and who knows where we'd be today with those people who were around.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. So let's go to Doom Generation. And it opens with a title card that says, a heterosexual film by Gregg Araki. So right away, you're laughing within the first seconds of the film. But what's the backstory of that? What?
The backstory of that is actually, Doom Generation is my first movie that has a real budget with, I had before Doom Generation, for Totally Fucked Up and for Living In and for my first two black and white movies, I was the cinematographer, editor, I did everything, production design. I had nobody. I mean, Living In and Totally Fucked Up, I had some producers helping me and a little bit of help, but I did kind of everything. And a producer after Totally Fucked Up and Living In came up to me and said, you make these gay movies that are too punk rock for gay people, because again, they were very polarizing in the gay community. And, they definitely had, there's a lot of passionate support, but a lot of detractors as well. In fact, when Living In played the Castro, there was a protest outside. What legend has it. So, so, he basically said, you make these gay movies that are too punk rock for gay people. So if you make a heterosexual movie, I'll produce it and I'll get you a real budget for it. And so in my sort of punk rock bratty way, I said, okay, I'll make you a heterosexual movie. But the idea being that it would be the most homoerotic, queerest heterosexual movie ever.
Ow! What the fuck are you doing?
Relax. You'll like it.
I'm not gonna like your fingers shoved up my shit chute. That's gratified.
Jordan, will you stop being so uptight and live a little? Jesus.
And so I was actually very intrigued by the idea of this kind of wolf in sheep's clothing. It was interesting for me to make such a homoerotic, quote unquote, straight movie, because my thought was like, there are people who would never go to see The Living End or a gay movie. You know what I mean? Because especially again, we're talking about the 90s. We're not talking about 2023. And so they would never see a gay movie because it's for a very specific audience. And but the idea being that they would go see a heterosexual movie that has a beautiful girl in it, And so it was, I've had many people tell me through the years that my movies made them gay. You know what I mean? Because it literally, it's a whole new thing for people to see and to just, sort of begin to question and begin to explore. And I think that's, for me, like, it's in terms of my own personal life, it's like a big part of my story is all about, sort of exploring those sort of gray areas.
There was another film that was a mainstream film called Threesome that I remember had a big effect on me.
I remember that movie. That was made by Andrew Fleming, who went to UCLA. So.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. And it was the same thing. I think a lot of people dipping a toe into queer waters, they say, I can see this movie.
Yeah, it's just sort of, it's like the idea being that you're sort of, you go from, it's not like just walking into the living end. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was very intrigued by that.
Okay, so you have a budget, a pretty big budget, right? It's like $800,000. That's a big jump for you.
Yeah, because Totally Fucked Up and Living End were both in that sort of $20,000 range, I think, on
so
60 millimeter.
It's almost $1 million. And so how did you come up with this script? Because I know, was it inspired by a comic strip or the two main characters?
The movie, not inspired by a comic strip so much as the names Amy and Jordan came from this comic strip that was popular in the early 90s, or not popular, but it was in like the LA Weekly or LA Reader or something. It was just like this very bizarre sort of kind of a punk rock lynching sort of comics. I mean, remember David Lynch had a comic strip in those days called The Angriest Dog in the World that was like the craziest lynching comic strip ever. But yeah, it was like that. It was like a kind of a very odd, macabre comic strip in the paper, and so I took the names from there. Everything, there's in those days. I mean, currently too, the things I work on now. I approach my movies are almost like they're like journals or diaries for me. They're very, very personal and very much things out of my life, things I'm, like I have a notebook of, would just jot down things that come to me, ideas or a lot of the things that Amy Blue talks about are just things that I would write down and now they're coming out of her mouth, and it's like, just, and so I'd always, I love, Couple on the Run movies, Living End's Couple on the Run movie, and so is Doom Generation, and the sort of violent climax of Doom Generation, a similar an incident like that had happened in my hometown. So I had a note that I wanted to put that in a movie one day. And so I always knew kind of where the ending was going to end up. And I have always sort of been interested in these sort of threesomes and, where the sort of couple dynamic is sort of thrown off balance. And, it's sort of from there, I knew I wanted to, have this couple run into this third person, and they sort of go on the road and sort of end up in this kind of very dark and super nightmarish place. And that's kind of what the framework of it was. And then from there, it's just like, I really, it's hard for me to describe. I don't know where it all comes from. It's just literally I sit down and write it, and this movie starts to play in my head, and the characters sort of start talking, and that's kind of, they sort of take over at a certain point.
And then you're working with, so the main threesome of the film, it's James Duval, who's became your kind of muse in a lot of your films, and then Rose McGowan. Is this her first big starring role?
Yeah, she had been like an extra, I think, in Encino Man. So.
I think sometimes the city is sucking away at my soul. Like yesterday, I was stuck in this humongous traffic jam on the 405 freeway. I just couldn't wait to get to the dead bodies lying there on the bloody asphalt. Like, all I cared about was getting out and moving again.
I know. I feel like a gerbil smothering in Richard Gere's butthole.
There just is no place for us in this world.
And Jonathan Schack, he'd done a bit, like he did a Zeffirelli movie right before Doom Generation, but he hadn't really worked for it that much either.
What do you mean, it's fine? Is it the size of a Vienna sausage? Or like a baby's arm? Is it cut? Is it uncut? Does it lean to the left? Does it lean to the right? Does it go in the southeasterly direction? Is it curved? Is it straight? Is it shaped like a fucking corkscrew or what?
What difference does it make to you?
Does he plunge it into you long, slow, and deep, like this? Or is it quick, short, and shallow, like a jackrabbit? Does he make noises like this? Or does he make him like... I know, he's probably a whimper, huh? You're right.
Did you really stop babbling and fuck me already?
They were all very new. I mean, the way it kind of came about was I had met Jimmy on when we did Totally Fucked Up. He was just this sort of... I met him actually at the coffee shop I used to write at, and it was the experience of making Totally Fucked Up that inspired me to do what I would later call my teen apocalypse trilogy, which is Totally Fucked Up, Doom Generation, and Nowhere. And so I wrote Doom Generation and Nowhere specifically for Jimmy after Totally Fucked Up. And so it was after, and Doom Generation and Nowhere. And once I had written those scripts, I always knew it was going to be this sort of trilogy with this kind of arc of him playing three different characters in three different movies, but sort of the center of each one.
I don't know what it is, but I feel really weird tonight. Like something's gonna happen.
Me too.
Hey, Amy. Do you love me?
Yeah, totally. Why?
It's just... I love you can mean a lot of things, like you'll do till someone better comes along. Or I can't describe how I really feel, but I know I'm supposed to say this. Or shut up. I'm watching TV.
Are you stoned?
all three of them are so beautiful. I mean, it's really, you picked very attractive actors.
They don't hurt your eyes, that's for sure. Yeah, that was one of the first things I told Marcus who from Strand Releasing, who did the remaster. I was so sort of stunned by when we were doing the remaster, because I had forgotten how beautiful the movie is. I mean, the lighting by the DP Jim Feely and the production design by the late great Therese Desprez, and the three leads, like literally all at the very, very peak of their beauty. You know, it was just a little almost startling to me to see it on the big screen and to see, you know, it look like that, because that's one of the things about the 4K remaster that I'm so excited about, is that, you know, for years, you know, the Doom generation for, you know, the last 28 years has sort of lived with this cult following, but it's on the basis of a really crappy like video copy. Like the original DVD of Doom Generation is not even letterboxed. It's really like not a great transfer. I guess I supervised it, but I literally don't remember. It's just not a great copy of the movie. So it's a little horrifying to me as a kind of perfectionist filmmaker that this is the version of the movie that people have been watching. That, and there's also a totally unauthorized R-rated cut that's completely butchered. And so those are the two versions of the movie that you know have been bootlegged and passed around, and like, you know, and so
what's the rating of the official one?
But the official one is unrated, and it's supposed to be unrated. I mean, I remember when I set out to make Doom Generation, I remember telling the producers, like, I want this to be like Last Tango in Paris for teenagers. Like, I want it to be like this transgressive, subversive, just sort of, you know, like not for mainstream audiences, you know, or just like, you know, mainstream audiences with a red flag, and, you know, and so, you know, like a forbidden movie. And so that was always the intent, that it would be unrated. And the distributor, you know, because of those days, like Blockbuster equaled money, they're like, oh, we have to do a Blockbuster version. And I said, no, you can't do it. It's not allowed. And so anyway, they did one anyway. And I demanded that they put on giant letters, like, the director hates this version and does not want this version to be seen. And, you know, they put it on little tiny letters in the back or whatever. And so that version has really come back to haunt me, because it's literally it's missing like 20 minutes. It doesn't even make sense. Like, it's literally just random images slapped together, because they just had when they took it to the MPAA said, you know, because the thing about Doom Generation that's weird is that there's not really that much sex or like explicit graphic things to cut out of it. It's literally all, you know, it's sort of a lot of times off screen or the way they're talking. And so the MPAA literally told Trimark, the distributors, they said, we find the whole tone of this movie like unacceptable. So you just have to keep cutting and cutting and just cut it, just keep cutting shit out, and eventually we'll give you your R rating. So they took out, like, I think over 20 minutes. So it doesn't even make sense. So it's really, I've always said, it's like, I'd rather you don't watch anything than watch that version, because it's like, and even the unrated version, as I said, is not letterboxed, and it's not a great transfer. So the remaster is, you know, it was like a brand new movie to me. I color timed the whole thing. We remixed all the sound, and like we even did ADR in a couple lines, and like I like pumped up all the music because it has such a fantastic soundtrack that was kind of buried in the original mix for some ungodly reason. So it's really like a whole new movie, and to see it on the big screen is just like mind blowing. Like, we just had some screenings in San Francisco this weekend, and it was incredible. Like, it's just like a totally different experience.
Yeah, so if you're listening, I would check to see if it's coming to your town. It just played at the Alamo Draft House
If it's
in LA.
coming to your town, yeah, it's like go see it on the big screen, because the thing about Doom Generation and also the film after it, Nowhere, which is the film that we're remastering now, because they're gonna actually do the whole Teen Apocalypse trilogy at the Academy of all places in the fall. So
hell yes.
yeah, so I'm
I'll be there.
I'm super excited about that. I mean, it's really like a dream come true for me. And Nowhere in particular has never been released on DVD in the United States. And for decades, every time I appear for any of my movies, people are like, where's Nowhere? When are you going to release Nowhere? Nowhere's my favorite movie. And so we're remastering that movie next. And so that's kind of in the works. And we'll hopefully the next few months have a new version of Nowhere as well.
Well, that's really exciting because Nowhere has an amazing cast and is obviously another classic.
Yeah, Nowhere's just sort of the grand finale of the trilogy. So, and it's, I can't wait to see it on the big screen. It's going to be amazing.
But this one is so gorgeous. It's such a beautiful film. And do you want to talk at all about the cinematography and the production design and where you shot around LA and how you got the look?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Doom Generation is it's just it was such a kind of crazy, happy accident. I mean, Jim Feely, the DP, was not really, I don't think he did any features before Doom Generation. I hired him because he worked with Bruce Weber a lot on music videos and commercials and stuff. And so he was very, obviously from the way the movie looks, he knew how to light pretty people and make them look like gods and goddesses, and that's why we hired him. I mean, that aesthetic was a very kind of influential visual influence on me. And so, I wanted it to have that sort of very gorgeous kind of look to it. But when I was doing the remaster, I was noticing the way he lit the movie is so, again, considering he had no crew to work with, barely any equipment, but the light in the movie is so beautiful and frequently undulating. Frequently kind of wavering, going in and out. It's very, very subtle and very, very beautiful. And the production design by Therese Deprez, who unfortunately died a few years ago. Her vision and so much of it, like the way the interior of that car looks was all her. Like she was literally like, we're in this car so much, it's like this car's got to be like a world, what I mean? So she just decorated the shit out of it, and it was everything. And the red room and the black and white checked rooms, I mean, she did that all by hand, just like created it. And so it was a bit, and again, like super low budget production, like very little money, very little time, and they really came through. And I had this thing in Doom and Nowhere both where I'm just, as a filmmaker, not that interested in reality, like documentary reality. It's not my kind of handheld camera, ugly lighting, like, oh, this looks just like the real world. I'm very interested in I'm super influenced by David Lynch and that, his movies and the way that, they're so surreal and dreamlike. And I wanted everything to feel like a dream. And I didn't want anything to look ordinary. Like they go to a bar and I don't want it to feel like, oh yeah, that's the bar down the street. I want it to feel like just this weird place that's heightened and subjective and accentuated. And so everything is, with, again, no money and no time, everything has this incredible stylized, kind of surreal look that is what we were going for.
Yeah, let's talk about that bar scene. So they go into a bar. It's completely covered in silver. There's a giant sign that says "Obey" hanging above the pool table.
We're accessories to 2 homicides. Doesn't that concern you in the fucking least?
Cool.
Kitten! Kitten, is that you?
Oh, God.
Don't you recognize me? It's me. Randy. It's your eternal love slave. Your slave.
Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but
Has this guy shot you full of dope and brainwashed you like all the others? You're high, aren't you? You okay? It's me! It's me, honey cake! It's me!
I'm kind of curious if there's any connection to Obey, the street artist, with that. And,
I think so. I don't know. Therese came up with the Obey. It's just like she also came up with the foil because, you know, we just had this shitty dive bar to work in, and you know, she had done, she did actually on Andy Warhol, I think, but I don't think it was. I guess it was before this movie. She had done a Warhol type foil thing before, and that's how she knew that she could do it. And so it was her idea to cover it for everything in foil, which looks amazing. And then, you know, Parker Posey.
Yeah, and then Parker Posey's there, well, like, oh, I'm in heaven.
To lift it to a whole other level. That's what I was so excited with the film screened at BAM a few weeks ago. I went to screen this weekend in San Francisco. Like, literally the audience cheered when Parker appeared. Because it's such an iconic moment, and she is so iconic. Her performance is so iconic in the movie. It was very, very cool.
Yeah, I just saw Beau is Afraid, which I keep talking to all my guests about, but she appears, you know, in the third act, and it's just like, it's just such a welcome sight. You know, then you know when she's on screen, you're going to be happy.
I'm gonna lop his dick off like a chicken head.
I've known Parker for forever, and yeah, I just think she's one of a kind. There's no Parker. There is no other Parker Posey. You know what I mean? Like, there's a million actresses, but there's only one Parker Posey. And we were just talking this weekend about superhero movies because I hate superhero movies, and we were talking about the only decent superhero movie is Superman with Parker Posey. But only Parker Posey sees when she like slaps Kevin Spacey in like one out of whatever Superman that is. Like, the rest of the movie is like garbage, but the 20 minutes that she's in it is like a whole other level of like insanity. Like, it's
hilarious.
Same thing with
check that out.
Oh yeah, when she's in Superman,
was in it.
It's fucking incredible. Like, it's like this giant, it's this giant studio blockbuster tentpole, and all of a sudden Parker Posey shows up, and it's just like this whole, it's like a John Waters movie, and the same thing happens with Josie and that movie Josie and the Pussycats, which is like fucking terrible. Like, literally, like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And then her and Alan Cummings play the bad guys or something, and the whole movie just turns into this surreal, crazy thing. It's like, you know, it's like her thing of like being able to sort of elevate whatever sort of, you know, tedious Hollywood thing she's in to a whole other level of just brilliant genius. She was that way in that Scream that she was in too. It's just like, I couldn't. Yeah. Like, I hate those kind of movies. And I remember it's like, but you know, and then when she died, I'm all, no.
You're done with that franchise.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, we can lead now.
She is definitely a treasure, and I think most queer audiences know that, but maybe she needs to be better celebrated while she's here because she's so brilliant.
Yeah, I don't know. I think she's pretty celebrated.
She doesn't have an Oscar. She deserves one.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like, you know, she's definitely, you know, she's iconic. She's fucking, there's no one like her.
For sure. I wanted to ask about the final scene, which you already brought up and said it actually happened, which is pretty scary. But it was probably the most controversial part of the film.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I remember when the movie premiered at Sundance in 1995, and just people were literally just blown out of their seats. It was like so intense.
Were there walkouts, or were they just like really upset?
There were some, but not that many. I think, yeah, it's. I mean, I'm sure there were walkouts, but it's not. I don't know. I think it's because it's so kind of shocking and startling and intense. Yeah, it's like I think that, and also it's not that. I don't know. It's not. It's a pretty. It goes by quite. I noticed it because I watched it this weekend in San Francisco. It's very intense, but it's not long. You know what I mean? It's like literally, it kind of hits you and then it's over. You know what I mean? And then the movie's over. It's very so yeah. It again, it's like it was Doom Generation. I don't know if it's my most polarizing movie or if litigation is the most polarized, but it was polarizing at the time. I mean, very, again, people love that movie and have kept it alive for 28 years, but there are a lot of people who don't like a movie and don't get it. And it's what I said. I was talking about this weekend in San Francisco. It's like, my movies aren't for everyone, but for the people that for the people that get them, for the people that are on their wavelength, it's like they really, really get them. You know what I mean? It's like when we were in San Francisco, it's like, some of these people were so just that, the movies had a profound impact on them. You know what I mean? Like, it's like literally like this movie changed my life. And, as a filmmaker, you kind of really can't hope for anything more than that. I mean, that's so humbling and sort of gratifying for me. I mean, it's not really, I don't make movies because, I want to win an Oscar one day. It's just like, as an artist, the idea that you could create something that is so meaningful to somebody and that matters so much to them. I mean, that's the highest compliment that anyone can ever give.
Well, I'm definitely in that group of people, for sure. So thank you. And I know that you've, in recent years, you still make films, but you've also been directing TV. And I noticed that you directed one of the Dahmer monster episodes, the one about his father. That was really interesting to see that you did that. One, because I started to realize that so much of what's on TV now or streaming now, that you had an influence on it. I don't think there is a Dahmer without a lot of the work that you did. And I'm curious about that. How was that experience to shoot that episode?
I mean, episodic is really, I remember the first episodic I ever did was American Crime season 2, I think. It was the season where the teenage boy is sexually assaulted, and John Ridley specifically wanted, like Kimberly Pierce did once, he specifically wanted kind of Sundance-y directors to direct that season, and he was a big fan of Mysterious Skin, so he, kind of just called me up out of the blue and asked if I would do it, and I had never done episodic before, but I always, since Nowhere, because Nowhere was actually written, it was right around the time of Twin Peaks, and it was written because Twin Peaks, the pilot of Twin Peaks was released theatrically in Europe. You know what I mean? It was sort of that beginning of the crossover between film and TV, and the idea that, and Twin Peaks as a show was so, just kind of blew me away. The idea that you can make this art cinema and put it on TV and people would watch it and talk about it like all over the world was so mind-boggling to me and so exciting. And so since Twin Peaks, I've always wanted to do my own TV show, which I finally did in 2019 when I got to do Now Apocalypse on Stars, which was, sort of, I always sort of describe it as, it's like a queer Sex and the City meets Twin Peaks, which is everything, all of my TV ideas, all the TV pilots I've written over the years, I've always been like, it's this crossed with Twin Peaks. Right. But so I had been wanting to work in TV. And so the opportunity to do American Crime kind of opened the door to me doing episodic. And I learned so much about show running and TV and the world of TV. how it's different than movies, but also similar to movies. And so I remember, because American Crime shot in Austin, I was hanging out, having a beer with Rick Linklater, which I always do when I'm in Austin, and talking to him about doing episodic. And episodic is interesting because I find it kind of fun in the sense that having made indie movies for so long, you get to like make a little mini movie. It's less, and you get to work with great cast. You have more money than you've ever had before. Equipment, like everything about it. There's a lot of toys on a set, especially if it's a big set like Dahmer. I just did that show, American Gigolo 2 for Showtime, and they had like this thing called a Russian crane, although they changed it to a Ukraine now because of the war. But it's like they use it in like Fast and Furious. It's just like a camera car that has a crane on it. You do anything with it. And so I've never had anything like that in any of my indie movies. So you get to just work with new toys, and you get to make kind of like a cool, short, like student film almost, but you don't have any of the responsibility that you have on a movie, because it's not yours. It's like the showrunners. It's like, like I didn't write Dahmer. I didn't, it's like I have no control over what. It just so happened to be that I got, this great episode with Richard Jenkins, who I fucking love. And, and I was happy that I didn't have to kill anybody and no one got eaten in my episode. So you just try to do the best work you can do with the script that you're given, and you learn so much and you learn so many tricks and you get to work with cool people. But I find it's such a you get to make the best episode you can, but you don't have any real control over it. You kind of do your thing and walk away, which is kind of almost like a little bit of a blessing, because a movie is something that, it takes forever. It's like you're working on it for fucking years, and like I look at Duke Generation, 28 years later, I'm still working on it. So it's like my movies are my like I don't have kids and my movies are my kids. So they're the way that people who have kids, it's just like they're a joy, but a burden at the same time. I mean, you love them, but they, they're a lot of work, and they really, it's a lot of responsibility, movies. So that's my story with episodics.
Do you ever see Rose McGowan anymore? Because I know she's like kind of like turned on her career a lot, and this being her first big film, like I'm wondering how she feels about it.
I haven't talked to Rose for years. We had a bit of a falling out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
next topic. Yeah. No. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, because you really did elicit an amazing performance from her in the film. I think.
Yeah. That's one of the other thing that struck me about the remasters. They are all fucking fantastic. You know what I mean? Like the cast are so incredible, and they were all so young and so new, but they're all like movie stars. I mean, that was one of the things that really struck me when I saw it again. I was just like, wow. I was kind of amazed.
You did that. You did it. Are you going to make another film?
Yeah, no, I'm always working on the next thing. I have a movie I'm working on and TV thing I'm working on. So, with the strike, hopefully it won't last too long.
I know this is the first episode of the podcast since the WGA voted for a strike. So now everything is thrown into disarray and question marks. But let's hope that it ends soon. And Gregg Araki, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, a hero of mine, and this is such a special moment for me to get this time with you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, we're really trying to get the word out there about Doom Generation and the whole Teen Apocalypse trilogy coming back to a theater near you. So
yeah, get out there and see it, listeners. And when is the Academy screening? Because I definitely want to see that.
It's going to be in the fall. It's rumored to be September, but that's kind of the goal we're working on right now for for Nowhere. So we're just about to start the remastering of it, and it's cool because we've done it once already with Doom Generation. We know kind of how long it takes and what's involved and all that. So yeah, it's gonna be really exciting. I'm just as somebody who has a background in film studies and film history, I'm just so happy that there is a version now of Doom Generation and soon of Nowhere that I'm happy with. That this can be like the version that after I'm gone, when they go back and like, let's look at the 90s cinema or whatever, like this is the version that I want future generations to see, because it's like representative of what it should look like and what it should sound like. So
that's through Strand Releasing, right?
Yeah. Strand is responsible for both of the remasters. So.
All right. So keep your eyes open for screenings. And thank you, Gregg. Very special day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Incredible conversation today with Gregg Araki, and how exciting that Nowhere from 1997 is getting the same treatment as Doom Generation. That will be an absolutely beautiful thing to behold. Next week, we have someone completely different, but equally iconic. Her name is Julie Taymor, and probably her most famous achievement is The Lion King, the musical version from Broadway and touring the world, which is still going strong. However, 20 years later, selling out everywhere. She's a genius puppeteer, stage director, and filmmaker. And we're going to be doing her film Across the Universe, which is a jukebox musical using the songs of the Beatles, but a completely original story. And how exciting to have her, a Genius Grant recipient and visionary director whose style appears in a lot of things these days. One of them we talk about, which is Beau is Afraid, has a very Julie Taymor-esque sequence in the middle. So her influence is massive. She casts a long shadow, and she came to speak with us. So tune in next week, and we'll have Julie Taymor and Across the Universe. And until then, we'll see you in Hollywood.